I have a lot to say. I'll start this review without spoilers, and then I'll put up a spoiler warning when I get into the details of the movie. I had a very strong response to this film, so I'm really dying to talk about it. First off, I gotta say that this movie is actually often hilarious, and is the most I've laughed in a movie theater all year. Although I'm simultaneously still a bit unsettled by parts of it. This mixture is not what I was expecting at all. And the unfortunate thing is that most of the comedy is not even intended. This has got to be the most surprised I've been in a very, very long time. In my view, there's basically two major problems with this movie. The first being Nicolas Cage, particularly the tone of his performance. And the second problem being the screenplay, which is ultimately quite trite and predictable. Look, one thing I want to mention is that I really don't care much about marketing, and I know that it's always manipulative, so I try to not get too hyped over this movie or anything, and I simply expected something decent. Yet I still felt disappointed, despite having nearly no expectations. This movie is a fascinating mess, to say the least, especially because of Longlegs himself. Now, let me get one thing clear. I am absolutely the biggest Nicolas Cage stan in the world, and I've already seen every single one of his films, but this very well might be the worst performance of his entire career, due to the way that it directly contradicts with the tone of the film. The film sets itself up as a slow-building, suspenseful crime horror tale, yet Cage acts like a literal clown. I'm not kidding when I say that I laughed through nearly each of his scenes, so in a way I ended up enjoying his presence, but not for the intended reasons. It genuinely is a train wreck of a performance. I haven't seen such an insane clash of tone between a performer and director like this in ages. They just gave Cage way too much freedom, and although I often like his old-school dramatic style of acting, it does not work in the favor of this film's aesthetic or story whatsoever. The story itself is the other problem in addition to Cage as Longlegs. I find the screenplay to start off strong, but it gets a bit meandering and ends up in a stupid spot in the third act. I really don't like where they took the story, especially since it had so much potential earlier on. I honestly just don't recommend this movie, but if you do want to watch it and you haven't yet, then pause the video and go ahead. I don't know why the marketing of this film made it seem as if Cage would be scary. Cage has this ridiculous white face makeup that's SNL-esque and genuinely made it look like a comedy or satire. Cage is so hammed up and over the top, it's as if he's in another solar system. Horror is subjective, but objectively Nicolas Cage comes across as non-threatening and silly looking. His voice is also so cringy and absurd. How could anyone possibly take this seriously? Considering that I've been watching the show Hannibal with Mads Mikkelsen recently, which has actual horror, I feel so underwhelmed by this generic project. People like Mads Mikkelsen in Hannibal, or Anthony Hopkins in The Silence of the Lambs, or Anthony Starr in The Boys, are all great monsters of man, because they're disturbed individuals grounded in truth, yet still demented and crazy and have real weight to them. They're so weird yet still believable and oddly human in the darkest of ways. On the other hand, Cage just comes across as a goofball and like he's a rejected Joker. I'll admit that there have been some successful campy performances in horror films, such as Jack Nicholson in The Shining, but in that instance it matched the tone of the film much better. Cage doesn't fit the tone of Longlegs at all. I rarely see bad performances like this, but this is absolutely one of them and simply doesn't work well whatsoever. It's not like Cage hasn't been intimidating before. A performance closer to Mandy or Pig would have been much more intense and entirely appropriate for this project. Oh well. I think that it would have been much more effective to cast a complete unknown for the part actually, rather than an extremely famous person. That would have been a million times more scarier and enticing. It's a lot easier to be scared of someone you don't know, rather than a likable celebrity who you do know. And yet even then, this movie would still have some other issues. The screenplay presents some significant problems, particularly around the midway point where a crucial piece of information is revealed. It turns out that Micah Monroe's Agent Lee Harker is a little girl at the beginning of the movie. Well, no shit. Anybody with half a brain saw this coming 15 miles away. There's lots of foreshadowing, and it's just the most obvious direction to go with the story. Suffice it to say, The internal groan I suppressed could have reverberated throughout the whole theater had I voiced it. This so-called reveal was glaringly obvious from the outset, something I predicted within the first few minutes without any effort. Its delivery, comparable to a sledgehammer blow to the side of the head, is both clumsy and illogical. I was really expecting the director Osgood Perkins to subvert my expectations, rather than literally playing into every trope, but he didn't. From this juncture, the film spirals into a series of insipid plot developments, adhering strictly to a cliched satanic narrative, reminiscent of a billion cheap horror flicks. For example, even just Maxine, which I recently saw last week. Where is the creativity and the originality? Come on. I also found that the order of information this close to the audience is often perplexing, since significant portions lack logical coherence, glossed over in a manner that prevents scrutiny. Conversely, elements that would benefit from remaining mysterious are subjugated to exhaustive exposition, diluting their potential impact. More depth in character development is sorely lacking. Instead, we endure protracted scenes like Micah Monroe meticulously tracing a triangle with 666 in a book. In retrospect, the marketing for Longlegs makes a lot of sense from a more cynical view. It garnered tons of online attention for its effective concealment of information and its refusal to show Nicolas Cage as Longlegs. Ironically, this was a masterstroke, as the film's quality diminishes with each subsequent revelation. Cage is also bafflingly atrocious, and so excluding him from the trailer is a weirdly genius but immoral marketing tactic in my view. Luckily, Nicolas Cage is actually only in a little bit of the film though, like 15 minutes I'd say. The rest of the whole movie is much better and actually pretty good and enticing. Horror films truly do lie on the shoulders of the main protagonist, and luckily, Monroe is excellent. She does a great job throughout and has a real tangible fear that heavily fuels the audience's sense of dread. Since she's scared, I get scared for her. And there's actually lots of good aspects to this film, disregarding the title character. I love the shot compositions, the sound design, the characters, the actors, the pace, and some aspects of the screenplay. The shot compositions are genuinely beautiful and masterfully composed, often very slow and creepy and very well done. The sound design is the MVP and probably my very favorite part of the movie. It adds a lot of unknown sounds to the background and tension. It's very Lynch-inspired, which is a high compliment. And the characters and actors are mostly great, especially Agent Carter, played by Blair Underwood, who provided purposeful lighter comedy and banter that balanced Micah's performance excellently. I didn't really love Micah's character's mom though in the movie. She's also really over the top like Cage, which comes across as comedic and unnecessary. I also don't think that the screenplay is entirely awful. I like parts of the script, like the Silence of the Lambs aspect, but I don't like the supernatural direction that it goes in since it's so unrealistic and just becomes funny. The religious stuff, like the mom asking the daughter if she still prays, just makes me roll my eyes, and it's pretty on the nose dialogue. They could have handled the themes a lot better. Yet, there's still something special about this film in regard to the atmosphere. This movie is all about the mood and the vibes. And the scenes without Nicolas Cage are basically all pretty intense. To be fair, I haven't been scared by a movie since I was a little kid, but I still love horror movies because of the thrills and the impact it can have on me. Alas, Longlegs only has sparse moments of terror, and gets completely derailed of any fear by Cage and the ludicrous satanic turn that's lazily written and very predictable. But not everyone seems to agree with me. Not at all, actually. I'm shocked at how many people got scared by this movie, and I think that this will be extremely divisive. Me and at least 10 other people in the theater were laughing really hard during the movie, especially during Cage's parts. But the rest of the audience seemed pretty locked in. It was a very split audience overall. And reading reviews for this movie is genuinely surreal for me and just has me questioning my sanity. I am genuinely curious though. If you were scared by this movie, please let me know in the comments. This could have been really special, but it gets too silly in the third act with comical religious ideas and has an all-time poor performance from Cage. I still had a pretty good time though and loved the vibes. It's basically a really weird mixture of paranoia and black comedy which is bizarre yet fascinating, and I couldn't look away. I still weirdly liked it, even though there's a lot that's wrong with it. And I'm really interested in Oscar Perkins' career as a filmmaker. I think I would still give this a light 7 out of 10 because it is interesting and not like every other movie that you'll see in terms of style. And when it is bad, it's bad in its own unique way. Usually movies are bad and forgettable, but this one is just a mixed bag across the board. Very, very good components with some very, very bad aspects at the same time. I kind of have trouble recommending this since it doesn't really meet many standards or fit into any boxes, but check it out if you're interested. I especially recommend checking this out once it comes to streaming, rather than going to the theaters to watch it since you might be let down. I'm warning you that it's really not that scary whatsoever, although maybe a little creepy, but let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.